are you the dracons, the dragons found here in the Americas? Let me know what you think. Leave a note in the comments. Episode number 49. This little light of mine. Let's get it. Let me know what you think. You are now tapped in with Dragon Canoe. We are steadily rowing and we are constantly flowing. All praise to the Most High. Allow. This is the text of the letter that the prophet Jeremiah sent from Jerusalem to the priests, the prophets, the rest of the elders of the exile community, and to all the people whom Nebuchadnezzar had exiled from Jerusalem to Babylon. After King Jeconiah, the queen mother, the eunuchs, the officials of Judah and Jerusalem, and the artisans and smiths had left Jerusalem, the letter was sent through Elisah, son of Shaphan, and Gemariah, son of Hilkiah, whom King Zedekiah of Judah had dispatched to Babylon, to King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. Thus saith the Most Highest of Hosts, the power of Israel, to the whole community that I exiled from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses and live in them, plant gardens and eat their fruit. You should take wives and beget sons and daughters, and you should take wives for your sons, and give your daughters to husbands, that they may bear sons and daughters. Multiply there, do not decrease, and seek the welfare of the city to which I have exiled you, and pray to your power in its behalf, for in its prosperity you shall prosper. For thus saith the Most Highest of Hosts, the power of Israel. Let not the prophets and diviners in your midst deceive you, and pay no heed to the dreams they dream. For they prophesy to you in my name falsely. I do not send them, declares your power. For thus saith the Most Highest of Hosts, when Babylon's 70 years are over, I will take note of you, and I will fulfill to you my promise of favor, to bring you back to this place. For I am mindful of the plans I have made concerning you, declares your power. Plans for your welfare, not for disaster, to give you a hopeful future. When you call me and come and pray to me, I will give heed to you. You will search for me and find me, if only you seek me wholeheartedly. I will be at hand for you, declares Hawah, and I will restore your fortunes, and I will gather you from all the nations and from all the places to which I have banished you, declares your power, the Most Highest of Hosts, and I will bring you back to the place from which I have exiled you. But you say, Hawah has raised up prophets for us in Babylon. Thus saith Hawah, concerning the king who sits on the throne of David, and concerning all the people who dwell in this city, your kinsfolk who did not go out with you into exile. Thus saith the Most Highest of Hosts, I am going to let loose sword, famine, and pestilence against them, and I will treat them as loathsome figs, so bad they cannot be eaten. I will pursue them with the sword, with famine, and with pestilence, and I will make them a horror to all the kingdoms of the earth, an execration, and an object of horror and hissing and scorn among all the nations to which I shall banish them, because they did not heed my words, declares your power. When I persistently sent to them my servants, the prophets, and they did not heed, declares Hawah. We're just staying in check, searching for the Melchizedek. Back to square one. We're just following the drinking gourd here. The Big Dipper and the Little Dipper. Draw a line between the two. You find the constellation Polaris, and between the Big and Little Dipper, you find the constellation Draco, and Ursa Minor, the dragon coiled between the two. Let me know what you think. leave a note in the comments. We're just staying in check, searching for the Melchizedek. To American blacks, the nation to the north emerged as the Promised Land. Almost immediately, large numbers of blacks began heading for Canada, following the Big Dipper in the Ursa Major constellation. A line drawn from the two stars at the right end of the Big Dipper's bowl leads north to Polaris, the guiding North Star. As the song proclaimed, they followed the drinking gourd. Nothing more, nothing less. Let me know what you think. Leave a note in the comments. We're talking routes of the Underground Railroad. Take note, take heed, take mention of this map and the paths in which the Underground Railroad leads. We're talking Americans, a native of America, originally applied to the Aboriginals or copper-colored races found here by the Europeans, but now applied to the descendants of Europeans born in America. We're talking originally applied to the Aboriginals or copper-colored races found here. We're just staying in check, searching for the Melchizedek, Nakush, or from the red color of the throat of the serpent. Nakush, coppery, hard, of brass. Nekusha, copper, brass, steel. Nekusha, Nakush, from the red color of the throat of a serpent, they say. Copper, brass, steel. Nekosheth, brazen, brass, copper. Nekushta, copper, Nekushta, and Israelitis, Nehushta, Nekushtan, something made of copper, the copper serpent of the desert, Nehushtan. We're just connecting the dots, staying in check, searching for the Melchizedek, Nekosheth, Nekushta, Nekushtan, something made of copper. Selected sites, we're talking mound towns, mound cities, mound villes. Again, we're just connecting the dots. We're just following the drinking gourd. We're talking Mount Horeb, Serpent Mound, Robbins Mound, Biggs Mound, Marietta Mounds, Grave Creek Mounds, Newark Mounds, Pinson Mounds, Tunacoonie Mounds. The list goes on. We're talking mound cities. We're just connecting the dots here. From Dayton to Chillicothe to Columbus to Marietta. Mound City, Chillicothe, Ohio. We're talking Tecumseh's birthplace. Old Chillicothe. Old Chillicothe. All these so-called cities, or mound cities as we say, are all connected to major rivers. Dayton, Chillicothe, Columbus, and Marietta. Mound cities. Again, we're just following the drinking gourd here. We're talking Tecumseh stomps down every house in Tuckabashie town. The Chickasaws, the Cherokees, the Choctaws, the Creeks. Moundville, Alabama, Lubbock Creek, Etowah Mounds in Georgia, Angel Mounds, Spiro Mounds, Cahokia, Aztalan, Tatham, in Florida, Calusa. Again, we're just connecting the dots here, quite literally, staying in check, searching for the Melchizedek. A large cache of copper artifacts was found in Mound 25 at Hopewell when it was excavated over a century ago. We're talking Nechushtan, copper artifacts found here in America. We're just gonna take our time with this one. We're gonna check out some pictures. We're gonna read some news articles. We're gonna take our time with it. We're gonna sit back, relax, and enjoy this show. So imagine the horse and buggy people stumbling across this land and discovering all these mound towns, not knowing what they were built for, who built them, or why. And if they did know, they're not going to let you know, oh Jacob. We're talking the big mound at St. Louis, once nicknamed Mound City, flattened in 1869 by the so-called heathens, man. Check it out. Troublemakers. Mound B is one of the largest mounds at Moundville. This is how it appeared in 1935. So we're just going to browse these pictures and see how casually you think you may be just going to the park. Whole time, this is sacred land. Mound towns, mound cities, mound villes. Mounds within the Army's Camp Sherman in Ohio, a site now known as Mound City, were excavated in the 1920s. Excavations were conducted alongside and even under barracks. So imagine they built these army barracks on, around, and on top of this sacred burial grounds. Come on, we're talking real life poltergeist. Cannot make this up. Birds of prey, such as this copper plate. We're talking Nechushtan, copper artifacts found from Mound City, Ohio, were depicted on some ritually significant middle woodland objects, they say. Are we talking birds of prey, or are we talking thunderbirds? The most experienced WPA excavators, called trowelmen, perform the exacting work of digging burials in the western Kentucky shale heaps. Look how disturbing this image is of so-called random horse and buggy people digging up the bones of what we know as so-called mound builders. Just connect the dots here. Large crews did an amazing amount of work at many sites during the Great Depression, particularly in the Southeast, and much of it was first-rate. One such example is the 1939 excavation of a flat-topped Mississippian period mound at the Bessemer site in Alabama. We're talking Bessemer, Alabama, Birmingham, Bessemer, Northern Alabama. So-called excavation of a flat-top Mississippian period mound. Many of the coastal shell heaps have been destroyed, as shown in this picture from a century-old postcard. Here, shell is being carted off from a mound at New Smyrna, Florida. Again, connect the dots. We're talking horse and buggy people excavating these so-called mounds, not knowing or connecting to whom these so-called mound builders really are. We're talking copper-colored cons found here in America. Several shell heaps along the Green River in western Kentucky, such as the Carlston Annis site, were excavated by WPA crews during the Great Depression. So imagine during the Great Depression, the Works Progress Administration is literally getting paid to excavate and dig up these burial sites. Many log-lined tombs were found superimposed on one another in the Robbins Mound. This is all right here in America. You can't make this up. Mound A is the largest of the mounds at Watson Break in Louisiana. Early archaeologists sometimes tunneled into mounds, as shown in the 1897 excavation of the Carriage Factory Mound in southern Ohio. Such excavations provided little information on mound construction. The name Medina comes from a large mound in Ohio that was dug in 1901. Again, we're just staying in check, searching for the Melchizedek. We're just connecting the dots, or in this case, connecting the mounds. The Great Mica Cave grave. The Great Mica grave was found in Mound 13 at Mound City. The Great Mica grave. Deep archaeological deposits have been uncovered at several sites in eastern Tennessee, including Ice House Bottom, where they date back to early archaic times. Again, extensive work was put in to excavate these so-called mounds, trying to figure out who are these so-called mound builders, they say. We're talking copper-colored cons found here in America. Remnants of paint as well as 2 suspension holes are visible in this breastplate from Seep in Ohio. So again, they keep finding these breastplates, these copper artifacts, Nehushta. The huge earthwork complex at Newark, Ohio includes this octagon and circle. Mounds are located inside gaps in the octagon walls. Check this out. Take some time and let it rest in your mind. The Toltec site in Arkansas encompassed a number of mounds, including these 2 large ones. This site is open to the public. Again, imagine going through a stroll in the park, not knowing that you're just walking over ancient grave sites here. Mound C at Tunacuni was covered with stone slabs. One of the biggest mounds in Moundville was located within this plaza. One of the biggest mounds at Moundville. Mounds such as this one, composed of shell in St. Petersburg, Florida, are occasionally shown on old postcards. While it is now gone, the mound was at one point an attractive centerpiece for the grounds of a hospital, they say. So imagine this hospital built over a sacred burial ground. Again, we got the heathen, the troublemakers, taking photographs and creating postcards on ancient burial sites. This large conical mound is one of many middle woodland mounds in the Mississippi Valley in Jackson County, Illinois. Midwesterners at the time favored marshy places where food was plentiful, they say. We're talking Jackson County, Illinois. Some flat-top mounds had ramps up their sides, providing access to the summits. This one was found in 1940 during the excavation of one of the Bessemer site mounds in Alabama. We're talking Bessemer, Alabama. Bessemer site mounds in Bessemer, Alabama. An elaborately engraved stone pallet showing a human hand and rattlesnakes was found at Moundville, Alabama. Again, we cannot make this up. Moundville, Alabama. An engraved shell gorget showing woodpecker heads surrounding a cross and circle design, said to be from Mississippi, was found in the 19th century. Again, we cannot make this up. It's all right in front of your face, or shall we say right under your feet, O Jacob. Excavations were undertaken in the Craig Mound to clean up after the looting of the Great Mortuary in the 1930s. The looting of the Great Mortuary in the 1930s. We're talking stolen artifacts, stolen Nekosheth, Nehushta, Nehushtan copper artifacts here. The large Robbins Mounds in Kentucky was dug in 1939 and 1940 by a WPA crew. Soil stains for paired posts and 4 internal supports which supported a structure were found by excavators when they dug the Krigler Mound in Kentucky during the Great Depression. Again, let me know what you think. Leave a note in the comments. The great majority of the mounds have now been destroyed. Imagine what it was like for the first government land surveyors who in 1808 came upon Cahokia, the largest prehistoric site in the United States. There were 24 or more of those mounds in one site. In one's view, 24 or more of those mounds in sight at one view. We now know there were about 4 times that number of mounds at Cahokia. One mound was the largest in the United States. We're talking Monk's Mound, which rises 100 feet in a series of terraces and towers. Mounds first became a subject of widespread interest about 200 years ago. Even Lewis and Clark's famous Corps of Discovery made a point of stopping to see a few mounds on their long journey to the Pacific. One of these edifices, the 62-foot Grave Creek Mound along the Ohio River in West Virginia. It bears no resemblance to those seen by the Corps of Discovery in 1803. We're talking downtown Moundsville. A direct link was made between big mounds and both enormous populations and societies likened to the world's largest ancient civilizations. Cahokia, the biggest site in the United States, a people capable of works requiring so much labor, must be numerous, and if numerous, somewhat advanced in the arts. Numerous as that which once animated the borders of the Nile, they say. We're not making the connection. They're making the connection. Or of the Euphrates, or of Mexico and Peru. Such wildly enthusiastic but thoroughly uninformed statements fueled speculation that the mound builders were not at all related to the Native Americans, they say. Come on here, we're just following the drinking gourd. The belief that mound builders were something other than Native Americans was finally laid to rest about a century ago, largely through the work of the Bureau of Ethnology. Surveys and excavations determine how they were constructed, classify them in terms of their shape, and obtain artifacts. Any doubts about who built the mounds were crushed by a lengthy report published in 1894, they say. We're just connecting the dots, staying in check, searching for the Melchizedek. As the song claimed, they were just following the drinking gourd. Much information about how mounds were constructed was thereby lost. Some objects were destined for museums or special exhibitions, including the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, because only the best artifacts were considered worth saving. In the 1930s, the need to impose some order on the many discoveries that were being made came to a head. Innumerable artifacts were being found in large excavations sponsored by Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal relief programs and the WPA, or Works Progress Administration, and the Civilian Conservation Corps. This interest partly motivated some of the New Deal projects, but it only became a major concern in the decades immediately following World War II. Fortunately, mounds in a number of places were incorporated into city cemeteries or public parks. One such example was a tall conical mound, the Conus, in the Mound Cemetery in Marietta, Ohio. Again, we're talking cemeteries or public parks. The Serpent Mound, also in southern Ohio. In this instance, a group of prominent Boston women raised the purchase price in the 1880s, and the earthwork was then turned over to the Peabody Museum at Harvard University. In 1900, the Serpent Mound was deeded to the Ohio Historical Society, which still maintains it as a public park. I'm talking right under your feet, O Jacob. A major federal program, the Tennessee Valley Authority, threatened to inundate many mounds and villages. Since World War II, archaeologists have increasingly focused on the discovery and excavation of sites liable to be destroyed to make room for dams. This work, once referred to as salvage archaeology, but now known as cultural resource management, started as surveys and excavations along rivers that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers were turning into huge reservoirs. Until recently, Poverty Point and related sites that were in use about 3 millennia ago were thought to be the first examples of mound building. Poverty Point is located about 15 and a half miles west of the present Mississippi River Channel in northeastern Louisiana. The main part of the site consists of 6 curved earthen ridges and several mounds. Of the 5 mounds near the ridges, one has been likened to a bird, another is conical, and the rest are platforms. An additional bird mound, the Mount Motley Mound, is located north of the main group. They are big mounds. One is 69 feet high and the other 51 feet. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show, O Jacob. We're talking 69 feet high. Bird mounds here. Come on, man. Cannot make this up. We're just following the drinking gourd. Most noteworthy are an unusually large number of beads and small animal-like figures made from various materials. Much of this material, such as galena and copper, we're talking Nehushta, Nekosheth, originated in distant places, they say. Poverty Point was not the only site with mounds in the lower Mississippi Valley. As one might expect, the big mounds and fancy artifacts at Poverty Point have prompted considerable speculation. Whatever took place must have been rooted in what happened much earlier at sites such as Watson Brake, they say. Mounds in the Midwest were quite small in comparison to the larger ones that dot the lower Mississippi Valley and Gulf Coast. Middle to late archaic people in west central Illinois and adjoining Missouri commonly buried their dead in natural knolls or low mounds, typically only a few feet high, perched on high bluffs overlooking adjacent floodplains. This term refers to a group of mounds where numerous extraordinary artifacts were found, many of which were dug up for the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago. They include the 62-foot-high Grave Creek Mound in West Virginia, which was witnessed by the Lewis and Clark's Corps of Discovery. By far the most impressive are those referred to as Adena in the Middle Ohio River Valley. Many of them were built over places where large wooden structures once stood. Many structures beneath the C&O, Riley, and Wright mounds in Kentucky. Elsewhere, the mounds covered only single structures, such as at Kriegler, Morganstone, and Robbins, also in Kentucky, aka Kankakee. Come on, man. The two Robbins Mounds in northern Kentucky were excavated during the Great Depression. The largest, again, let this sink in. The largest, about 130 feet in diameter and 20 and a half feet high, is an excellent example of an Adena mound. Each tomb contained the remains of no more than a few individuals, mostly completely articulated skeletons stretched out on their backs. Highly valued objects were often worn by these people. We're talking small, carved stone tablets, copper bracelets and breastplates, pieces of cut mica, and marine shell beads. Broken pottery has also been found, and Burl Clay has pointed out that the distributions of sherds in a few mounds could indicate some kind of graveside ritual. We're talking Nehushta, Nekosheth, Nehushtan, copper artifacts. Cannot make this up. Seat Mound, the Edwin Harness Mound, and Mound 25 at Hopewell, all in Ohio, contain the remains of at least 132, 178, and 102 people respectively. These figures certainly underestimate the true number of these burials. Some objects have survived intact. Occasionally, great hoards of artifacts have been unearthed, including those made from copper, mica, and obsidian. Come on, man. We're just connecting the dots. Certain copper artifacts, especially breastplates and axes, are covered by impressions of textiles, and more rarely, scraps of woven materials. A carefully studied rectangular building in Mound 13 at Mound City serves as a good example of these structures, which had a diameter of about 70 feet and a height of 3 feet, was dug in the 1920s after it and nearby mounds were damaged or destroyed by the Army's Camp Sherman. Come on, man. We're talking significant archaeological, sacred burial sites here, man. Excavations were undertaken about 40 years later when the National Park Service developed the site. The later one, a square building defined by soil stains where vertical posts once stood, measured about 40 by 42 and a half feet and was littered with bits of mica, pieces of artifacts, and burned bones. The floor next to a specially prepared crematory basin. There were also 4 low earthen platforms with burned bones from several people and pieces of artifacts, 13 piles of burned bones. Most remarkable of all was the great mica grave. The soil of the rim was mixed with beads, perforated animal teeth, pieces of galena, and other items. The grave was lined with mica, and it contained the cremated bones of 4 people, a copper headdress, and a mica circle. While burials such as the Great Mica Grave dominate our impression, few if any artifacts accompanied the overwhelming majority of the peoples whose remains were placed in these structures. Burial in one of these tombs was likely as important for a reaffirming group identity through a sense of shared experience as it was a means of commemorating a person's life. Fine objects were often buried with the people. Freshwater pearl beads, perforated bear canines, copper ear spools, panpipes, and celts. They include a group of 20 vessels placed alongside an infant in a deep pit that initiated the construction of Mound 7 at the Elizabeth site in west central Illinois. Each tomb contained the remains of 2 to several dozen people, represented by extended skeletons and bundles of disarticulated bones. In one of the tombs, small piles of bones, including both skulls and long bones, were placed on a narrow ledge, which held additional skeletons in the surrounding ridge of soil. Many fine objects, including those made from copper. Again, we're talking Nekosheth, Nehushtan, copper artifacts in America. Fancy burial artifacts included those made from copper. Again, I'm not even saying this, I'm just reading it. I'm just connecting the dots here. Staying in check, searching for the Melchizedek. Returning to Trempolo, dirt was sometimes merely piled on human remains that had been placed on the ground. In many places, there are mounds that contain burials scattered throughout their field. They include the well-known Copina mounds. Excavators have found intact skeletons, some in puddled clay graves or wooden canoe-like troughs, as well as cremations and bundles of bones. And it was the copper, along with the galena, that gave Copina its name. Literally, the mounds are named after the copper and galena stores found at the mound, aka Copina. 4 low mounds at Tunacuni at the base of Lookout Mountain in northwestern Georgia show how differently bodies could be handled at a single site. 3 earthen mounds were covered with stone slabs. The artifacts were a diverse lot, particularly considering the small number of burials in each mound. Again, copper and silver, copper breastplates, and shark teeth, among other objects. 2 of the Tunacuni graves are worthy of special mention because they were located beyond the outer limits of the mounds. These sites make it clear that the mortuary-related activities were not restricted to mounds. A deposit of debris that included obsidian flakes was located on a steep hillside, no more than 164 feet away from the mound. A remarkable find because obsidian is rarely found in Illinois. The Napoleon Hollow findings are consistent with those of an excavation of a habitation area near the Tunacuni Mounds that yielded pieces of copper and mica. We're talking Nekushta, Nekosheth, copper artifacts, man. We cannot make this up here. Within Mound A, which measured 83 to 86 feet, there was a low platform later covered by 2 major episodes of mound construction. The initial platform had a 45 by 70 foot flat top that was as much as 2 feet high. There were also well over 1,000 burials, both intact skeletons and disarticulated bones found within the mound. Almost 400 of them were in the upper part of the platform and on its surface, the rest in deposits that covered the platform. Often the bodies were buried in shallow graves, at least some of which were lined with mats. Only a few skeletons had artifacts with them, including pottery, chipped stone tools, and copper ear spools. Come on, man. They followed the drinking gourd here. They include the Capitolium Mound at Marietta, Walling, northern Alabama, the Ogier Mound at Pinson in western Tennessee, and Mound A at Cold Springs in north central Georgia. Recently, it became necessary to dig part of the Capitolium during a renovation of the public library that sits on the mound. Come on, man. When that was done, it was discovered that the builders of the mound had removed the original topsoil. Particularly in central Ohio, southward into central Kentucky, some also lie farther afield, such as Pinson in western Tennessee, Man in southwestern Indiana, Golden Eagle in west central Illinois, central Michigan, Little Spanish Fort in west central Mississippi, and Marksville in east central Louisiana. Often the only evidence of their existence comes from old maps because many were flattened long ago. In peculiar ways, such as part of the Newark Earthworks in central Ohio, that is in the Mound Builders Country Club golf course. One way to provide a taste of the rich diversity in earthwork shapes and sizes is to discuss them in terms of 3 categories. We're talking classification mass, a great deal of variation in size, shape, and layout, including construction details. Mount Horeb, which sits on the crest of a hill in the beautiful horse farm country of central Kentucky. The Works Progress Administration excavators of this Adena site uncovered a row of post molds along the ditch's inner edge. The screen earthworks interior from view. This wall of posts, assuming it was high enough, screened the earthworks interior from view. The ridge, ditch, and wall arrangement makes no sense from a defensive point of view, so the earthwork must have been of ceremonial importance. Another fine example of a circular embankment and ditch can be seen in the city of Marietta's Mound Cemetery. Here a low ridge and correspondingly shallow ditch surround a high conical mound called the conus, just like Mount Horeb and many other circles. Several examples of the latter include Spruce Run and Wright in central Ohio, the Anderson Great Mound in east central Indiana, and the Biggs Mound in northeastern Kentucky. Fires and cremations were an important part of the rituals that took place at these sites, they say. Come on, man. The Wright Mound contained 2 cremations and 3 other burials. Much larger geometric earthen enclosures were also built. They include the roughly oval Adena earthwork known as Peter Village that is within sight of Mount Horeb, but most of the large earthworks were constructed in central and southern Ohio. These embankments, often with adjacent ditches, usually formed reasonably regular shapes, such as circles, squares, octagons, and parallel lines. The Serpent Mound in southern Ohio does not fit comfortably into any of the 3 categories noted above. This long, low embankment snakes its way down a narrow ridge. The tail forms a tight spiral and the other end widens to join an oval embankment, commonly interpreted as the head, although some have thought the snake is swallowing an egg. Recently, even the dating of the site has been brought into question. Come on, man. We're just staying in check, searching for the Melchizedek, connecting the dots, following the drinking goal. Hopewell in central Ohio, originally known as Clark's Works, is noteworthy because some of the most impressive artifacts have been found there. Many of them were uncovered while digging for objects to include in the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition. Others were discovered during further excavations in the 1920s. The largest mound at the site, Mound 25, measured at 189 by 550 feet. Let that sink in. 189 by 550 feet, and it was a large cache of copper artifacts. Come on, man. Nehushta, Nekosheth, Nehushtan, copper artifacts. Excavations in the mounds yielded impressive artifacts, including well over 100 finely made obsidian bifaces and a large cache of copper artifacts, such as axes and breastplates. Over 500 copper ear spools were found elsewhere in the mound. The other mounds also produced precious objects. Mound 11, for example, had about 300 pounds of obsidian and several thousand sheets of mica. Come on, man. You let me know what you think. Please leave a note in the comments. The people buried in the Adena mounds possessed numerous items fashioned from copper, such as bracelets. The trade increased during Middle Woodland times, judging from the number of artifacts. Among these materials were copper from the Lake Superior deposits, silver from Lake Superior and especially Ontario, galena from Missouri and Illinois, mica from the southern Appalachians, shirt from various places including Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois, pipestone from Ohio and Illinois, alligator teeth from the lower Mississippi Valley eastward to Florida, and marine shells. The overwhelming majority of all the obsidian from the sites east of Mississippi came from only 2 of the Hopewell site mounds. Excavations at Hopewell also yielded large caches of copper objects and mica. For example, more than 50 copper artifacts, mostly breastplates and ear spools, were accompanied by about twice as many from cut mica. Over 100 pieces of cut mica were taken from a grave in the Edwin Harness Mound. Deposits of chipped stone artifacts made from high quality, non-local shirt, they say. Perhaps it had something to do with the esoteric knowledge that the builders of the greatest mounds and earthworks were thought to possess. The numerous skeletons unearthed at many sites show few signs of the kinds of injuries that occur when people fight each other. A lessening of conflicts is consistent with more permeable social boundaries that allow some people to travel unscathed across long distances with ritually significant and highly unusual objects. Let me know what you think. Leave a note in the comments. We're talking episode number 49. It's time. All praise the Most High. We're talking sacred copper artifacts here. We're just staying in check, searching for the Melchizedek. All praise to the Most High.